Okay, let me get into. I thought about getting into my teacher zone, not totally, because I think if I go too,
Yiska, what the hell is up with the playoff bracket in the Overwatch League?
You're asking the right question. I think. I think there are a lot of confused people.
I think everyone was asking that.
A lot of people were asking that. There's a big question about the why. The why is a little bit harder to understand because there are always certain factors. Basically, surmise it under adult stuff and then some mishaps. But generally speaking, we landed at a very complex position where, I think it would have been better if there was my explanation. But yeah, I'll try my best to explain to you what the playoff bracket it looks like. I think was kind of sweet how they did the draft.
Okay.
I was actually quite excited.
I think it's fair to say, like, pretty much no one, like, including like the players, the GMs, even like the people who were paid on the Overwatch League like broadcast to talk about it, didn't necessarily get it when it started. So like, the playoff bracket, very basic. Like, what are we chatting? How is that? How is it structured?
It is actually not helping you to think about this as a bracket. What would help you is to think about it as two groups. Okay. There are two groups. There's the upper group and the lower group.
Sure.
One group has some mild advantage in the draft, and that advantage was gained by the Atlanta Reign winning the midseason. So you have two groups, and if it was GSL group play and they showed it in groups, I think it would have been much more understandable. Because what's happening is you have the top group, that's 4 teams. You have the bottom group, that's 4 teams. They play against each other until one team has 2 wins, until one team has 2 losses. 2 lost teams are out. The 2 win teams go on. That then leads into a single elimination bracket.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the final 4 teams. Here, problem is, if you lose, you're out. Okay.
Yeah.
You could have won your entire group. You get into the single elimination bracket. You only lose 1 match, and you're out. Okay.
Which I think isn't like a bad thing in general, right? Like, that's how the sits are. It's probably quite a heatheny thing to say. I feel like you're gonna come back against me on this one. I generally think that, like, with a top 4 in place, a single elimination bracket is arguably more exciting and more fun to watch, because there's so much pressure on each kind of individual game. No more second chances. I get that, like, it's unlucky, arguably, that if you lose that and you're out, it's maybe not as fair. I keep bringing it back to football and kind of that kind of thing because it's something I can kind of bring it back to that I watch a lot as well. Like, that's what makes games exciting, that they spin on such a singular moment that, like, one map could be the difference between losing and going home, and you don't get that second chance. So I almost kind of prefer the single elimination bracket. I just think it could have been sold better.
Yeah, I think, like, there are arguments for it, for sure. I personally prefer formats that find reliably the best team, because I think that's really satisfying if that happens. I will say the single elimination offers more upset potential, more excitement potential. You get rid of all this, the upper bracket team doesn't have enough of an advantage, and, like, the other team lost. I will say what is also, unfortunately, rather boring very often is the 2 teams that will end up playing in the grand finals already played in the winner bracket finals because they're clear 2 best teams in the Overwatch League.
That's fair.
7 out of 8 times when that happened in playoff situations in the Overwatch League, the eventual winners of the grand finals won. And you could argue that the single elimination format offers more excitement. The only thing that I then say is I would value the eventual Overwatch League winner, the achievement of that, less, and would look more at the entire achievement of the season, where I would say Atlanta Reign and Florida Mayhem have been clearly the best teams. And even if, say, the Dallas Fuel wins this year, I would still have those teams as the best teams of the year.
Do you think because we've had, like, a double elim, kind of the established format for so long, like, just having that now is kind of a bit weird, right?
It is weird, and I think really, well, the problem is that a lot of things just compounded in of issues compounded in this format. A lot of disgruntlement with the communication of the league. A lot of how does this even work? A lot of confusion how this works, right? The framing of it all wasn't great. Nobody understood like how do you gain even qualification, right? Especially in the APAC region, this was really hard. And then how are picks determined and whatnot. So like to just briefly give you an idea of how the top 8 teams were chosen. I think the easiest ones are top 3 in A. Okay, top 3 in A is look at the regular season. The team with the most wins is the first seed. That was the Atlanta Reign. They have the best score. And it's the Florida Mayhem and the Houston Outlaws. Top 3 in A, directly qualified. We overall have 5 slots for North America. There are more teams. Of course, you would have more slots there, right? So then you have 2 play-in slots. Those were played last weekend. The Boston Uprising won, didn't lose a match, right? And then you have the London Spitfire, and they won against the Toronto Defiant in the last round. Unfortunately, Toronto not going to be at their own grand finals. That's a real shame. But they once again made it into the playoffs. Great achievement, right?
Sure.
NA, pretty straightforward. Admittedly, it's going to get hard. At any point, you don't understand what I'm telling you, okay?
Okay.
You just jump in as the good student that you are, and just let me know that you didn't, you didn't catch what I explained, okay?
I will attempt to, as the audience for this, I will attempt to answer any questions that come up.
Sweet. So, top 2, APAC qualifier.
Okay.
The problem is they have a very weird system this year. They got contenders teams in, but only in the second half, right?
Yeah.
They got the problem with the Chengdu Hunters that kind of like signaled, maybe not. There was never clear communication, and then eventually in the midseason they communicated to the league that they were not going to come back. So the regular season in the APAC region, for the first half was just our teams. Okay.
Yeah.
While the contenders teams played their qualification. And then later, there was a tournament bracket where there were knockout stages. And there, once again, there were 2 groups. And the winners of those 2 groups got invited to midseason. And then they had once again a knockout stage. And there, let me not lie, the Dallas Fuel and once again, the Hangzhou Spark won it.
Yes.
What it determines who gets the direct qualification is the average knockout stage performance. Okay, we have to give them some leeway here.
Yeah, of course. Well, it was an unprecedented thing. Like, it's
for sure, right? So
we can allow it.
Here's the absolute confusion that comes in because Spark wins both tournaments on their group side, right? They are locked in for a slot, right? They make it no problem. That's very easy to understand. Okay. Second is the Infernal, and there they had a tiebreaker system where it was average knockout stage performance and then map score. Okay. Yeah. Average knockout stage, Infernal was first in the first spring's knockouts, third in the summer knockouts, average of 2. They have a better map score. They directly qualify over the other team. So, as we know, Dallas Fuel ran through that bracket, beat the Seoul Dynasty, really the other teams, Guangzhou Charge and Shanghai Dragons, not their greatest season and didn't really stand a chance. It was really between those 2 teams. And Dallas took it in the end. So now we have our 8 teams, okay?
Yes.
Here's the weirdest part, where I think they completely dropped the ball in terms of format.
Okay.
Where it is actually indefensible that they did this. Okay.
Cool. All right. Now we get.
That's my personal opinion, and it is also the reason why everyone is confused.
Okay.
So, keep in mind, I told you the determining factor why the Spark qualified was the average knockout stage performance placement.
Yeah.
They won both brackets, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So they have an average of 1. So Infernal won 1 and got third in the other, so I have an average of 2.
Yes.
Now you would think, because that is the determining factor in who qualifies, that also be the determining factor in who's first seed.
Yes.
You would have thought wrong.
Yes, it wasn't. It wasn't. Why did they change that over? Why did they change that between the 2? Why?
The reason I'm not quite sure. To be perfectly honest, I'm pretty sure that tiebreaker was initially part of the way it was going to be determined anyway, and then they pulled it back somehow. I'm not sure how it entirely works. I'm very confused by the ruling as well. Even Jake on the desk was very confused by this. Everyone was confused by this. The general managers were confused by this, right?
Yeah.
Roston, the general manager of the Seoul Infernal, didn't know. And then later in the interview, they had Gray, the general manager of the Hangzhou Spark. He also didn't know he wasn't going to be first pick for APAC.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think like you're right. Involving the qualification element, like the record in qualification, right? That makes sense. It's adding weight to the rest of the season, right? So it's not just reliant on how you did in knockouts, which, let's face it, things can go wrong. Teams can perform badly. Other teams can do well when patches come in, when there's different metas. But the changing it overnight, the changing it from one moment you're doing a certain set of rules, the next moment you're qualifying by another certain set of rules. There's no wonder everyone is upset and confused by what is happening.
And that's sad, because here's why it is sad, okay? The draft is highly strategical.
100%. 100%.
How they chose this, right? If someone in the moment tells you, oh, you're, by the way, not the draft seed that you thought you were, everything is just
everything's
for naught,
different.
Okay?
Yeah.
This thing does not matter anymore, right? And therefore, this not only were the teams robbed of those strategic choices because of that, and I don't want to put blame on anyone. I'm not sure why that situation occurred.
Yeah.
But be that as it may, both the league and us were robbed of that cool strategic choice. So we have said that for the sake of the argument, we have two groups, right?
Okay.
The upper group is the one with Atlanta Reign. They're the first seed. They got the first seed by them winning the mid-season. Presumably, that would mean, like, if the Florida Mayhem had gotten first seed in NA, they would have still gotten first pick because NA won the mid-season. Okay.
Sure.
They were just afforded an advantage based on that.
Yeah.
Cool advantage, by the way. So Atlanta, first seed in NA, picks Florida, and it doesn't mean that they're playing against them. It means they are throwing them in the other bracket.
Yeah.
Right. So I haven't found a word for it. Let's call it Nemesis Draft. Okay. There's some resemblance to that in League of Legends, where there was once a mode where you picked your opponent's hero. Okay. So Florida on the other side of the bracket, presumably the idea Atlanta had is, we want to avoid the second best team in the Overwatch League for the longest time possible.
Yeah,
right?
Makes sense.
So now here the confusion comes in, because we all thought Spark was going to be the next pick. It was actually Infernal. Now Infernal makes an interesting strategic choice. Okay.
I was going to ask about this, right? Because there was some chat going around that Infernal perhaps didn't quite understand how the draft worked.
They understood. I made sure. I actually asked around if they understood that you're picking not your opponents, but your
the ones you're kicking.
The other side, right?
Yeah.
And they did know. Okay. This was a strategical choice by Roston.
Okay.
So it is actually the case that the best thing you can do is stack your bracket as much as possible. You want the hardest teams in your group. Now you're saying, wait.
Why would that be the case?
Why would that be the case?
Yeah.
Now, this is only true if you believe you're the best team in the league and you want to maximize your chances to win. Okay? If you just want to maximize your payment, or your placement and your payment, I suppose, then, okay, you pick the weak group, right? Try to get in there, get as many wins. Now, the fact that we have the single elimination bracket makes it very interesting, because when you draft yourself in a way where you are in the stronger group, you now have 2 chances against the best teams in the world.
Yeah.
And if you make it out on top,
you
then get the theoretically easiest of the 4 opponents that you could have got, well, 2 opponents that you could have gotten from the other group. The easiest path, therefore, to the grand finals, just by win percentages that were averaged out and whatnot, is actually if you picked your group to be very, very strong. So the Infernal picks the London Spitfire into the other group. So, okay, I would have loved if that fact was going to be demonstrated to viewers before the draft happened.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So imagine.
Sure. Go on.
Imagine you get 2 of the coaches from already disqualified teams in. Maybe you vet them for their strategies that they think is best. Mm-hmm. So I want the easiest group and I want the hardest group.
Yep.
And let them draft out the process, explain it to the viewers once, and then see it played out. Right? Yeah. How everyone. I think that would have been a dope story. I think Infernal is a little cocky in their drafting strategy.
It's definitely ballsy, right?
Yes, for sure. I think if Atlanta Reign, it would have been interesting if they had picked someone very weak into the other group and would have let Houston and Florida come to them early. Okay. Yeah. That would have been interesting. I think they probably value the scrim experience higher. I'm actually a pretty big fan of this. Now, the problem with everything this year is the system is fine. The communication is not.
No, okay. A constant issue that the league has had, if we're fair, really. Just like you said, like it's a constant thing with hype, right? Because I always think that when I'm watching the Overwatch League, like during the games, you get hype, you see things happen, but there's always opportunities that never seem to get taken. So like you're right, having a coach discuss the tactical pros and cons of whether or not you're going to pitch someone who's, let's say, quote unquote weaker than you or stronger than you into the other side of the bracket. That is guaranteed to get people talking about what everyone's doing. Before So Infernal did that, and everyone got confused because they were like, why would you? And until it's explained to you, like you've just explained it to me and to everyone watching, hi, by the way, you just don't get it, do you? You wouldn't, would you? Because it's just not. This is the first time they've tried something like this, and they haven't explained it in an effective way.
And it gets more complex because the new patch makes it so that teams will evaluate the opposition differently.
We've had this a lot. Like every time playoffs comes around, every time grand finals comes around, someone wins in like the meta lottery, right? Like when there's a new meta kind of comes around, and kind of the favorites for the playoffs before that don't necessarily stay that way. Would you put Dallas Fuel above Atlanta Reign and they're like now as favorites?
Atlanta Reign is hard because they're so good on all the other positions. But because the Zarya is presumably really important, and that's then on Hawk, the player that hasn't played as much, right, this year.
Sure.
It's an interesting position for them to be in, right? I assume this team will not will into a meta or accept a meta that doesn't suit them. So I assume, like, if this is actually hard meta, it's probably because they're really decent on it anyway. So I think this closes the gap for sure between the top teams and the rest. Do you feel perfectly clear? Do we want to have some study notes? Like, how do you think about the playoff format, or the draft rather? Do you understand the draft? Do you think that's all cleared up with you?
Yeah, I think we got it. I think it was key summary notes, revision notes, everyone, for if anyone ever asks you about the playoff draft. The annoying thing is, right, that all of this now just seems like it was a giant missed opportunity to actually get people excited about it as opposed to confused about it, because it's exciting. It makes sense. It would have made it would have raised a lot more hype if people had understood it beforehand, if they just released it before, got people talking about it, and then we all could have had a great night watching the draft and enjoying all the drama that came from it. But hopefully, maybe they learn from this.
No, for sure. Like future renditions of whatever Overwatch esports will turn into, hopefully we'll have more time. Like maybe you finish the play-ins, and then you give teams actually some time to develop a strategy. You give yourself time to develop a flavor to the draft. You explain it. You have some guys go through it. And then it also, just through the time and the sophistication that comes with that, it could have been dope content, especially if, like last year, you got everyone in one big call and had the drafts and had the reaction and whatnot. That's my favorite part.
Cool. Well, in terms of the future of the Overwatch League and what might happen, we will hopefully be talking about that in a future episode where I ask Yiska all of the burning questions that I, and by extension you, have about the Overwatch League and Overwatch esports in general. So if you do have anything that you want to hashtag ask Yiska, I've just kind of made that up on the spot. Are you happy with that? Then leave them in the comments or hit him up on Twitter because he's very active on there at Yiska out. And we got that right. See, I've done my homework. I've done that homework, and now I'll do some homework around the draft and the playoff bracket, so I understand it better. So yes, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Ask Yiska. Cool.